good asset manager always has a plan B. And that's not to say I'm not going after plan A 100%, but there are so many different factors that weigh on whether this, the deal that you're doing can actually go through. You can do everything and the tenant can turn around and say, didn't get board approval. And you might have done your due diligence, they might have been a great tenant before, you might have got a relationship with them elsewhere, but I've seen it so many times where a deal has fallen through not because of the asset manager. I would consider a careers coach. I would also consider talking to mentors, to friends, to your bosses, like, where do I go next? What do I want to do? How can I expand this? But don't go with questions, go with answers. I would like to expand my role. This is how I see it working. How do you think that's going to go?
Welcome to the People Property Place podcast. Today, we are joined by Sarah Jones, Head of Asset Management at Brightbay Real Estate Partners. Sarah has 15 years of experience in real estate and has worked at Brightbay, formerly RDI REIT, since July 2015. She specialises in creative, hands-on asset management in a range of commercial real estate sectors. Prior to this, she was at ExxonMobil, where she worked across EMEA, looking at innovative solutions to the real estate needs of the company. Sarah started her career at DTZ, completing her qualification with experience in valuations and corporate recovery. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Well, look, I'm really excited about diving into your career in a little bit more detail, and also some of the things that keep you busy outside of work as well.
Okay.
But a place that I always like to start these conversations is, how do you get into real estate? But before we get into that, why did you go to Loughborough and why did you study geography?
So I remember being at school and I had no idea how to pick a course or what I wanted to go and do. At that point, real estate wasn't really on my agenda. And so I think one of my teachers just said, just pick something that you like and that you enjoy. And so geography was kind of picked by the fact that I did enjoy it. And then I started looking around universities and none of them kind of felt right to me. And again, another teacher was like, with your sporting background, why are you not looking at Loughborough and Bath? And I'll be honest, I'd never even heard of Loughborough at the time. Like I hadn't really done that much research. And then I went to visit it and I was like, yeah, this feels like home. There were just sports fields everywhere. They had an indoor designated netball court, which is just unheard of. And my passion, outside work has always been sport. I just love playing. So it felt really, really good. And then decided to go there, managed to get in, and you can then go and play every single sport that you like for your halls. And because it's Loughborough, it's a decent level. But if you represent the university, you can't then play for your halls. So it makes it kind of a bit more of a fair playing field. So the first year in particular, I ended up playing, like, you name it, I played it. I was playing hockey and netball, tag rugby. I was also doing archery, volleyball. I think we were in the pool swimming. We were doing water polo, like you name it, I was doing it. And it just really made the whole experience much more enjoyable.
So I guess as a kid, you grew up playing sport as well.
Yeah, I didn't know any different. I think as a family we're sporty. I mean, my parents they won't like me for saying this, but they're in their 70s and they both still play. My mum was playing netball till last year and she's now moved across to walking netball. And my dad will still beat me on a squash court. So we're sporty naturally. And my sister and I were just put into sport every day. We didn't know any different. And to then, that's carried on. I think a lot of people do lose it. It's part of my life now. And it's just the way that you finish work and you're like, oh God, I need to do something. Everyone de-stresses and detunes in different ways. For me, it's jump on a tag rugby pitch or netball court, or a game of squash here and there, and just keep fit generally. So that's the way I live my life now.
What were you like at school? Were you particularly academic, or what were you like as a...
So I went to a grammar school. So I guess your answer could be yes, but equally, I didn't find school particularly easy. And I probably didn't apply myself, I would say. Like the person I am now, I would say I'm extremely hardworking. The first 4 years of school, no, first 3 years of school, I probably didn't try that hard because I didn't find it that easy. And people generally, you try hard if you find something easy and enjoyable, but I didn't. And the thing that changed it for me was that we did work experience, beginning of year 10. So that's the first year of GCSEs. It just made me go, right, I need to work hard now. And I changed from that day on, and I've worked extremely hard ever since.
So you landed at Loughborough, did geography. It sounds like
Yep.
You actually went to Loughborough to do sport and didn't do any geography.
Well, I did some geography. I did enough.
You did enough
Yeah.
to get through. Where did real estate kind of come into your thought process and realising that was a career that you wanted to take?
So I didn't have any family in real estate, and I didn't know anybody in real estate. And so I think my first piece of interest was like when we moved house, and I was probably about 16. And we had lived in the same house all this time. And then we started going around and looking around houses. And I was just so excited to go and see other people's properties, possibly just, a normal thing. But equally, I was thinking, well, I would knock this wall down here and I would create this and I'd make this bigger and I'd do this. And I just had that natural kind of interest in property. And then we moved house and I didn't really think about it that much more. And then it was just something at university when someone mentioned it, and I was like, do you know what? I'd love to do what I was like enjoying when we moved house, but like on a much bigger scale. And so then I just started, probably my second year, I started looking into how could I get some experience, because I had no idea really what being in real estate meant.
Yeah.
And I managed to get a week's work experience at DTZ. And I really enjoyed it. So I did that, I think, at the end of my second year. And I think I went into a valuations team. I did a bit of property management and I did a little bit of agency. And it just gave me a flavour enough to go, yeah, I'm interested. I was engaged and I was like, it's not, I didn't love the academia of school of writing essays and reading something, understanding it and that analysing it and writing an essay. I wanted to be a bit more kind of hands-on, creative. I like the big thinking of property where you can go, well, how am I going to make this work? And so it all kind of like naturally sort of fell into place. And then after that week's work experience, I was like, yeah, that's the career I'm going to go for. Let's see how it goes. And I applied for DTZ, and I mean, that was an incredible interview process. But I got the job and I was like, right, I'm done. And it just kind of went from there.
Challenging time in the market, September 07 when you landed?
September 07, fine. October 07, maybe not. It just changed so quickly. And I think I was probably maybe blissfully unaware as I started on day one. And DTZ had just taken over Donaldson's. So there were about 110 graduates, roughly speaking. And I just didn't know what hit me. I turned up on day one and I had a geography degree. And I reckon probably 90% of people there had gone and done a real estate degree as well as had some experience. And I remember like my first week and I was put into a valuations team. And to this day, they were fantastic. But I didn't really have a clue that first week, because you can imagine geography degree. And they said, right, do you remember what you studied about yields? And I went, what's a yield? And they must have just looked at me like, do you remember in your course a yield? And I was like, I did a geography degree. I'm actually going to go tomorrow and I'm going to study part-time at South Bank University. And they're like, right, okay. So I'm not sure how much use I was to them, certainly in the first few months. But then I studied part-time. I went to South Bank every Wednesday, and then the following year the same. So 2 years I did this kind of course, and it was, again, very intense. And I had a week of work, basically, a day off, so to speak, but you still need to complete your work. And then the course was very intense as well, because of course it's a master's part-time, jammed into sort of 2 years. So I was finishing my working day, studying, getting to the weekend, playing a bit of sport and studying. And that was my life for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that time in the market was very tricky, very, very tricky.
What did you learn? Because you must have seen people getting laid off or people getting moved apartments.
Yeah.
Or you obviously kept your job. Did you have to re-interview for it or?
No. So I went through the first year in valuations, and then in the second year, I went into like the insolvency team, corporate recovery. And that team was busy. So that, I think, probably protected me for a little while. And it was a very tricky time in the market. Like it couldn't have been a worse time for us to all join. And if it wasn't you getting made redundant, it was your friends. And you'd meet, basically, it felt like every Friday, and I'm sure it wasn't quite that bad, and go for drinks with the latest to get made redundant. So whilst I enjoyed corporate recovery, it wasn't really where my heart was. And I had previously applied for the asset management team, but that year they weren't taking anyone on. So my heart was in asset management. I'd spoken to somebody about what that kind of meant. And I was like, yeah, this is for me. This is where my strengths are. And this job came up at ExxonMobil, seconded, and I was like, what a great place to go and like live out a tricky time in the market, because it lasted for many, years after that. Whereas the oil industry was completely protected. Like it was just like a different market. And we were just being like, I went and interviewed and got the job. And I was on a plane like every week. And, there was just a different industry.
Before we get onto that, the words corporate recovery and insolvency for someone who's been in the industry for the last 5 years or so probably has no idea what that means, or that a department even exists.
Sure.
Can you just break down, like, what is a corporate recovery and insolvency team? What were you doing day to day, and why was it important at that time in the market?
Okay, so essentially, let's say the majority of property takes some form of debt from the bank. When the markets go, you often see more banks going, well, the values come down, the debt is now either a bigger proportion of the value or even above what the value is. Often we were seeing the owners not repaying their debts, and then the banks would get us involved and say, what can we do with this property? Where can we go with this? We're not getting essentially the mortgage back, the debt back. Yeah. What do we do next? And my job, or the team's job, was to support primarily the banks. But sometimes it could be sort of a bigger insolvency business where the whole business has gone and actually there's only a small part of the property. So if a whole company's gone into a liquidation or administration and they only have a bunch of property over here, but they've also got some other assets, we would play a part in that, and we would just try and come up with a strategy to release as much equity back to the bank as possible. Very important back then. I suspect it's busy departments again now.
Yeah, it's probably coming back through now, or it will do, right? Yeah. As banks don't want to be holding those liabilities, so engage your team to put a business plan together,
exactly,
and work out which should we fire, sell, which assets should we actually spend a bit of money on from a capex perspective, and work through to create more value and then exit. So exactly. In a sense, it's quasi asset management of sorts. Although I know certainly back then, a lot of people wouldn't look at it as asset management, or they'd be snobby about it. But it very much was the makings and the foundation of
I suspect, there's a lot of crossover. Generally, though, I would say that insolvency is a bit more, you need to get to the point a bit quicker, because the banks, it's like catching a falling knife often with these properties, because so many times they were badly looked after, in bad state of repair, but also the tenant wasn't particularly strong, or the tenant was leaving or not paying their rent, or whatever it was. And the banks are just saying, well, look, we lent 10 million. It's only worth 8 million now. We don't want to spend any capex on it. And if you let it go any further, it could end up being 7 million, 6 million, 5 million. So I would say it's probably asset management related, but asset management can also be, it's often a much longer play. Whereas the banks were like, just give us our money back, because unless we're going to make 8 turn into 9, turn into 10 very quickly, we want that money back so we can then redistribute it elsewhere. Yep. So definitely similarities, just probably a more short-term lending, I'd say. So
you got your letters having sat in that seat, is that right? You qualified, and then the opportunity came up to be seconded or move to Exxon?
Yeah, so then I applied for the role at ExxonMobil, and I got the job, and the job sounded fantastic. Like, to a graduate, I travelled a bit, but not a huge amount. And the department that I was working for was basically the asset managers for ExxonMobil. It's client side, but they're not landlord. So the difference is really that team supported the wider business. So simply put, it's oil and gas company. When they think they've found oil and gas, so the exploration team go, they think they've struck oil, and then they go, right, we need a team out here, we need an office of this size, and we need it this quickly. So that team would then support that across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And, not every oil find is successful, or it's really successful and suddenly you need to upsize. So often you would start in a kind of a co-working place because you want that flexibility, so flexible offices.
Yep.
And then when they go, right, we found oil, we've struck a deal, and we've signed the contract, we now need to have a permanent office, 5-year lease, 10-year lease, whatever it is. And so our job was to go and just support the company's needs as seamlessly as possible, because everything just needs to be done quickly, and we need to go in and just open a new office there.
So it's kind of a corporate real estate role within the business, looking at their real estate needs.
Exactly.
And is it all commercially orientated, or were you looking at the infrastructure and the rigs and the oil bits themselves?
No.
Or were you looking at any of the residential properties that these engineers and scientists and others had to get involved with? Or was it literally just the kind of the commercial leases and the infrastructure around supporting the wider
99% of what I did was commercial. So it was all about the offices. Occasionally there would be a moment of like some certain countries, certainly the Middle East, would have residential because they wanted a lot of people to move out there. They just didn't have the resource out there. So they would need to build or lease or buy or whatever it is, a residential complex, for example. So then the people that are moving out there can live and work. So you're doing a little bit of both.
So you must have done an awful lot of travelling, because can you just give me an overview of the scale of Exxon's portfolio and size as a business?
So you're testing my memory now. At the time, and I'm sure now, it's one of the biggest companies in the world. Now, there are so many different parameters. I can't quite remember which one it is, but it's vast, and its headquarters are in Houston. So I was traveling a lot to Houston because we'd have annual meetings, and then there'd be other conferences and things like that. Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I actually really covered Europe and Middle East. I was out in the Middle East a lot over probably 2 or 3 years because I had a couple of really interesting projects there. And then I covered a lot of Europe as well. And then occasionally there'd be an opportunity for kind of like an internal assessment. And they're very controls regulated for such a huge company. And so there was one trip that I did where I went across to China and Australia. So the experience that I got there was just incredible. Like for the age that I was, to be able to just be like, yeah, I'm getting on a flight and I'm off to Doha again next week was just amazing.
Were you the envy of your friends who were sat in valuation or rating or doing?
Possibly, maybe. And especially at the time, because this was kind of 2009 through to 2015. So certainly at the beginning, it was really tough in the real estate market. And I was able to just not worry about job security, and I could just get this most amazing experience. So, I mean, maybe at the beginning, but with anything, you've got to, there's the swings and roundabouts as to is it good long term? And the travel sort of wore me down. At its worst, I mean, we all did it there. You could be on a flight every week. And of course, working in the Middle East at the time, I know Dubai has changed slightly, but Doha would be a working week of Sunday through to Thursday.
Yeah.
So in theory, to get everything out of it, I should be flying out on Saturday, staying there, and then flying back on Friday. I never did that, and I was never asked to do that. But you end up, you miss out on your life. And I've just told you how exciting and important sport is to me. So I wasn't doing my netball training, and I wasn't playing tag rugby, and I wasn't doing that during the week. It then became so important for the weekends to really count, because I just had such limited time with friends, family, and doing the stuff I loved. So by the end of it, I think I was like, yeah, do you know what? I'm I'm ready. I'm done now. This
Had
travel.
a good stint.
Yeah.
I've got that international experience. I've visited loads of different countries.
Exactly.
I've kind of got it out of my system.
Exactly.
I need to do something else.
Yeah.
And how did you decide what to do? And how did, at that stage, what kind of jobs were you looking for? And what did you land on?
I mean, look, I was also sort of, with Exxon, because it's not a real estate company, to progress there, you've got to be flexible as to which department you go into. So, I was having chats with sort of my senior managers of like progression through the company, and there was a discussion about moving to Houston, and that's the way to really progress your career. And you've got to make a decision at that point as to whether you are a corporate person. Is this me for life now? Because there's a lot of people at Exxon, it's a job for life. And I can totally understand why. It's an enormous company. And if you're happy to go from department to department, there's plenty of things to keep you busy and keep you, striving to reach your goals. For me, the next opportunities, it could have been in the upstream, which would have been very interesting, but I've got no experience of that. Or it could have been in the downstream, or the supporters, or the supporting companies. So that would be the HR department, the IT department. And I just wasn't excited about that. My passion was property, and I'm sure there were definitely different roles I could have done there, but there's going to be a ceiling on any company that I only want to be in real estate. Okay, well, your jobs are limited now.
Yeah.
And so then I think we talked at the time, in fact, I just was like, I need to find something where I can get back into London. I'd love to do asset management client side, because I think that worked really well for me. And I just started interviewing, and that's when I met the guys at RDI REIT, and that's where I am now, although we've changed our name to Brightbay. And I think sometimes with interviews, you just click with people and the style of the company, and everything just feels kind of like, yeah, this is right. This is what I want to do. So yeah, I interviewed, got offered the job, and handed in my resignation. And I think at the time at Exxon, not many people did. It was job for life. It was very secure. People said to me, why would you want to leave? Like, there's nothing better than this. And I was like, it's just not for me. It's not where my passion is. So yeah, that's when I moved across to RDI.
So what was the role that you moved into? You obviously moved in as a senior asset manager. What was the portfolio you're responsible for? What was the business doing? How's it structured? Can you give me a little bit more of an overview of that? So
in the interview, I think they talked me through the existing portfolio, and it was quite small at the time, but it was bitty as well. So I think it was probably only 250, 300 million, I would say at the time. And it was lots of little leases. Predominantly, they bought a portfolio that was Secretary of State, so essentially the government. Long income, not much, in the way of breaks. There's no real sort of asset management opportunity, although they were coming to the end, so that was starting to come out. And they sort of alluded to, we've got something else coming in as well. And I was like, okay, great. All sounds fantastic. I'm sold on the company. All sounds great. Sign me up. Day one, they're like, right, we've just bought £500 million worth of property. We'd like you to look after it. And I was like, okay. And that first week, it was baptism of fire, I think.
What did they buy?
So we bought the Aegon portfolio, AUK, and it was a mixed bag of some retail, a little bit of retail parks, warehouses and offices. And we had support from their team. They carried on sort of asset managing initially. And I was sort of overall in charge of like, how, drive a strategy. What are you going to do? Is it, how are you going to grow rents, lengthen leases, etc. And I guess the other sort of important thing to know is that back then we were a REIT, and we sort of had it's a different ball game to being private equity that we are now. So it was about lengthening leases and growing rents, because we paid out a dividend, and that dividend was reliant on me getting better rents. And so lengthening leases and increasing rents was all it was about. And we probably, I would say, didn't really we didn't really do what we're doing now. We didn't really look to sell too many properties at the time because, you know, if you sell it, you have to find something else as well. And a lot of the stuff that we had was longer leases anyway. So it just, you know, my goal was to try and increase the value by just doing those two things.
I guess, yeah, as you said, the Secretary of State portfolio kind of sounds like quite core, long-term, income. Yeah. As you said, extend the leases, create some value, maximise the NOI, but also the appreciation, just so given the structure of the business, you can afford to pay out those monthly or quarterly dividends to the shareholders. So you were lumped with £500 million worth of kit, and it's like, Sarah, make good of this. How did you go about doing that, and what was your kind of mindset at the time when that kind of bombshell was dropped on you?
Gosh, so to be fair, I was really well supported both by my boss and also the team that was still asset managing, and so that was and I wouldn't necessarily need that. I wouldn't need that support now at all, but like back then, I definitely did. And the team that sort of asset managed it were just giving me feedback. Okay, this is where this is, and it was just like almost like a longer handover period, which was great. I think I spent the first few months I felt very kind of out of my depth, and I think you've got to get comfortable with that. If you're going to be progressing your career, you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that needs to last or that needs to be, you know, you should feel supported and everything, but I definitely felt, oh my God, how on earth am I going to do all this? The way I went about it was I'm quite good at finding out the detail and working out what's important, seeing sort of an end goal and working out how to kind of get from A to B. So, you know, take a big, you know, a property with, say, like 18 units. You always, I mean, I've heard loads of asset managers say the same thing. You look after, right, what are the key things that are going to happen first? What do I need to kind of troubleshoot? Where are things going to go wrong if I don't renew leases, if I don't get agents engaged and things like that? And then you look at sort of longer term things. So you get that all those balls rolling. Then you look at the kind of longer term goals, right? Well, how am I going to move the rents from this to this? And I love property where you are more in control of setting the goals and the rents. So with an 18, let's take an 18 unit property, you can create your own evidence. You're in charge of every deal that goes through, and therefore you know that you can just keep rents ticking on. And
you mean by that, you don't have to look for external comparables because you've got enough of a base or enough of a property that if you move one on, that sets the new base rate or rent that you can then mirror match all the other leases against.
Exactly. And I think you often do need to look at the external, but it's always going to be internal first, isn't it? So if you've got 4 deals that you've just done, the one down the road that's not actually that comparable, you can't put as much weight on it. The markets that are actually a little bit trickier are the ones where there's lots of different landlords and they're not all necessarily institutions, or, you know, they're not all after the same goals. So you can see when you do rent reviews in certain markets, you look at this great evidence that you've created and other landlords similar to you, and then there's like some soft deals and you're like, well, why? And they're individual investors and they just don't understand or care about sort of the consequences of doing a slightly softer deal. They just need that income coming in, or they, you know, they just need to make sure their tenant stays. And so they don't realise that actually doing that deal affects my deal over there.
And does it affect your deal?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think there's pockets, like I always think you can overgeneralize too much. You can just say industrial is amazing and everyone was talking about how great industrial was. It absolutely is. But within that, there are pockets and nuances. So you can take, and it changes as well. So you might have a great piece of kit and you just think this is fantastic, but the wrong, you know, one property comes up and it's 20,000 square feet. If you've got 3 other 20,000 square feet in the market, you're competing against them. So it could be a great market, it could be a great sector, but suddenly you're not doing the deal that you thought you could because 2 tenants have gone bust in comparison. It's that kind of thing. So you've got to be very kind of aware of that and know what's going on elsewhere in the market.
Do you feel that your recovering insolvency days and then the corporate real estate experience you had gave you a really good grounding and basis to be a very competent asset manager, or did you feel that you had to learn entirely new skills?
I would say the whole of my experience at DTZ was a good grounding, but also a lot of new skills. So I think the valuation element, I'd say anyone considering a career in this industry, getting valuation experience, I just think is so key. It sets the basis. Everything we do is about the value of the property. And understanding that is then, you can then build on that, whether you're going to become an agent, whether you're going to become an asset manager, developer, investor, whatever it is, you need to understand how value is created and what things change in the market to give you different values, how the market changes to fluctuate the values, essentially. The insolvency side, definitely. But again, when I look at what I was learning at ExxonMobil and then now, I think the best asset managers are the ones that are quite creative. I always say, like, a good asset manager always has a plan B. And that's not to say I'm not going after plan A 100%, but there are so many different factors that weigh on whether this, the deal that you're doing can actually go through. You can do everything and the tenant can turn around and say, didn't get board approval. And you might have done your due diligence. They might have been a great tenant before. You might have got a relationship with them elsewhere. But I've seen it so many times where a deal has fallen through not because of the asset manager. So I always try and have a sort of plan B in place. And you get used to the sort of feelings of this isn't moving as quickly as it should. They're delaying this. There's just things that make you go, right, I need a plan B in place. And so with asset management, you also start, I visit my tenants quite a lot. They all know me. And they will call me if there's a problem. I then give that to someone else because I'm not going to help them with fixing the roof or the toilets are blocked or whatever it is. But if that bit isn't fixed, they then won't talk to me about renewing their lease and their rent review and things like that. So I would say to answer your question, there were so many great skills, but the asset management that you learn every single day and you get used to so many different experiences that you go, okay, right, now I'm used to this. And one example of that is I meet my tenants and I go around and I see them, and you can start to see when a business is struggling. And before you get the P&L and cash flows through? Absolutely. So what are those telltale signs? So I would say you always speak to your tenants. How's business going? And they'll probably tell you the answer in that sentence, actually. Costs are going up. We're really struggling. Oh, we have to make a few redundancies. Oh, yeah, utility costs have gone up. So there's that kind of element. Then you walk around these places and is it full? Is the car park full? Are people on site? What are there's always someone lower down that shows you around, that's not necessarily the FD that will give you kind of the facts and figures. It might be someone that, the site manager. How's things going? What do you think? And they'll be saying, yeah, do you know what? People aren't coming to work at the moment, or people are working from home, and you just start to build a picture of there's something wrong here. And then you start listening to, some of our sites, that they needed to be busier in the factory for things to be going well with their company. And you start recognizing, this doesn't feel right. And of course, the accounts that come out, they're backward looking. So it tells you the past, and that might have been okay, but today, how are things? What is the sense? What is it feeling? And so you actually do get to see or predict things aren't going to be so good this year. So how did your role evolve then, having joined as a senior asset manager? How did your role evolve over the years to you're currently head of asset management of the business? So I started as a senior asset manager, and then, I mean, there's both great things and trickier things of working in a smaller company. The trickier things is there's not natural promotions that you can then be like, okay, I'm now this level and I'm now this level. The pro of that, though, is that if you're proactive, if you're diligent, if you're engaged, if you want to learn, you will start to naturally widen your experience, because everything will be thrown at you. So I've never experienced just a normal kind of asset management role in the sense that I just do rent reviews and lease re-gears and things like that. It's always been kind of cradle to grave. I'll be part of the underwrite and part of the investment team as and when that happens. And then it will be the business plan, and then it will be going, do you know what, I don't think we should keep this one. This tenant isn't feeling great. My plan B is this, but actually I think we should get out. And let's say, for argument's sake, we decide we're going to leave, we're going to exit, then we'd be part of the team that puts it together and sells it. Within all that as well, of course, there's then the development angle, the joint ventures that need to be put together. So it's been easier, I would say, to grow the job into head of asset management, because there's no one else there to do it. And if you're willing to just take on more and show that you're able and keen, then it's just easier for the company. Like, if I just mop it all up. So that's how I've done it.
The business you touched on has gone through some changes. Can you just talk to me about the recent change and the kind of the rebranding to Brightbay? Sure.
So when I started, we were a listed REIT. So it was all about paying the dividends and trying to increase our share price. Then we have been taken fully private. So we were bought out by private equity, and we've ended up being, wholly owned by a private equity company. But the rebrand was to kind of signal to the market, yeah, we're a different entity now. We're private equity rather than a REIT.
And what's been the mindset shift, or what's been the shift in terms of business plan and approach from being a REIT to kind of private equity owned and run?
I would say the biggest change is kind of the speed. Property can take quite a long time, especially things like rent reviews. They drive me crazy that it's not like, well, we can negotiate this and do this in 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen like that. And that is key for so many elements of the property world. I think what I like about private equity is business plan. This is what we're going to do. This is the time frame in which we're going to do it, and it gets executed. It's done. The nuances and the changes to that would be, of course, the market. The market's then gone, you thought you were going to sell it now. It's not a good time. So that's when you come up with your plan B and your plan C, because you thought you were selling your property for development. And in actual fact, all the leases expire quite soon. Development market's not there. So then I need to sort of implement the plan B. But the goals aren't any different. The goal is, how can we increase the value of this as much as possible? How can we squeeze all the pips out? And it's about kind of increasing the value more than the rental income.
Total return rather than just driving the income.
Exactly.
So in terms of the portfolio, can you give me a bit of an overview of the portfolio as it stands today, the sectors you're invested in, and what you're kind of working on?
So we have got a number of hotels which I'm not that involved in. The rest of the portfolio, we've got rid of probably all our retail now. And then what remains is industrial, so warehouses. And then we've also got some offices, or the offices are central London, but also development angles as well. So we're not keen on too many offices unless they were in the right location and doing the right thing. Our offices are development opportunities as well.
Got it. Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I just want to come back to a point you mentioned earlier, just in terms of creating your own role and expanding it. I know off mic we spoke about having a career coach. Can you just talk to me a little bit about why and how a career coach came into your into the frame?
So I catch up with my CEO and have sort of reviews with him. And I think the review I had last year, I was just doing my usual, like, well, where am I going? What am I doing? How can I expand this? What's next? And we kind of just talked about next opportunity. Well, what's the kind of, there's a shorter term goal, there's a longer term, medium term goal, and there's a sort of longer term goal. And he was like, well, if you're feeling stuck, why don't we get you a careers coach? And I said, sounds great. And so he put me in touch with somebody, and he was absolutely brilliant. So that's how it all kind of came about. And then he's just really helped me sort of reframe, like, what am I trying to achieve now? What am I trying to achieve in the future, and how to kind of get from A to B. And so it's been a nice kind of, I've done that a little bit myself to grow the position that I'm in. And now it's kind of like, right, how do I now go big?
And is what's being useful, having that external perspective rather than it just always being internal, looking, you, the CEO, and other kind of team members, is having someone who isn't necessarily real estate specific or like really knows the intricacies of your day-to-day, can offer a wider perspective?
I think that helps so much. But I also think it helps that it's a brand new person and doesn't know me. So they're seeing me today for the first time, whereas I've been in my company now for 8 years. And my team will see me as the person I was when I joined and everything that I've done since. But also, like, we're so small, like, if you want an idea, you bounce it off one person, and you keep bouncing it off the same person for 8 years, you're only going to, have this kind of idea. Whereas actually doing it to someone external, non-property, just someone that's had a great career themselves, to just go, hey, have you thought about this? And it was a game changer for me.
What are the thises that they've kind of pointed you to kind of think about, just in terms of some learnings and sharings?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the game changing things that he spoke to me about was, he got me in the first meeting to just say, well, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And so I kind of gave him what I thought, I was good at and I was not so good at. And he was like, so how hard are you working on your weaknesses? I was like, I put so much time, effort and energy into them. And do you know what? I'm really trying hard was kind of the summary. And he said to me, stop. Because essentially, what you're good at will help you fly. Put your time, effort and energy into that, and you will see sort of so much better growth than the stuff you're not so good at. He said you could put 80% of your time in and you might make a bit of a difference. You might get better at it, but it's just not where your skill set is. So then we started talking about, how can you then keep progressing knowing that you're not going to put too much effort into this stuff? And we started talking about kind of taking people on that can do those bits for you. And so off the back of that, I employed somebody. I'd essentially say she's strong where I am weak. And she wants to, she wants to learn, she wants to grow. So she's got all the kind of values that I really like. And she works well in the company and all those bits fit. But she's bringing in a skill set that it just doesn't make sense for me or for the company for me to be doing that. And she will go and sort of execute things that I've just got this great idea and I need somebody to then go and implement it. And she goes and does that. And
then the piece that you're really strong at, she's deficient in or slightly weak in or doesn't have the skill set or is not best placed to do the piece that you're great at, right? Right.
So then, our skills kind of complement each other. But what I really like about her and other people that I've worked with is that she wants to learn it and grow. So she could be good at those things. She just hasn't had that experience yet.
And do you apply, do you do kind of caliper and other assessments, personality profiling assessments to try and work out where people are strong and weak? Or how do you go about trying to ascertain this?
Do you know, I've done personality tests before. We actually did a great one as part of a tag rugby thing I did. And that was probably the most recent one I did in 2018. Before that, it was probably 10 years ago. And I think they're brilliant. But we don't use them so much where we are now. I think when you're in a sort of smaller company, I know exactly what I need and I need someone that's good at this. I don't necessarily need a personality test to tell me that they're that kind of person. I need someone that's got this kind of skill set.
And then you'll look and you'll test and forensically examine that through an interview process to make sure you're comfortable with that.
Exactly.
So what were the other things that your career coach mentioned or advised you to do?
So one of the things we looked up was whether I could do a course on sort of finance. And the reason for that was because it was one of the things that I just think I want to understand a business a little bit better. And so I've enrolled and done Harvard Business School distance learning and did a finance course, and I really enjoyed it and I learned so much from it. And then the other thing I would say is that we sort of explored, and maybe the next step that I'm going to be looking for now is maybe going and having a position on the board. And I think there's so many sort of opportunities that I could benefit a board because of my real estate experience and all the other things that I could bring to it, but also that I think something like that would really benefit me. So we sort of explored that, and that's the live update of where I am on that now. So
adding another skill stack to your experience. So
that's the plan.
So if anyone's looking for someone to come and sit on a board, you can tap Sarah up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely.
You touched on the touch rugby thing there, and I want to spend a bit of time doing it because I think you've underplayed how good you actually are at tag rugby. Can you just tell me a little bit about that? Because I know you're passionate about, as we've touched on, sport outside of your day job. Can you just talk?
Sure. So, I mean, this is a topic I could talk about for ages. I've played since, oh my God, I can't even remember when I started, but it was when I first came to London. So probably 2009-ish, but give or take, because I can't quite remember when I started. And it was just a case of like, oh, that looks like a fun sport. And I always liked rugby, but I just never thought I would cope with actually full contact rugby. And so a group of us just went and played, and it was for so many years social for me. And I just love running around a pitch, playing my sport. Then in 2018, I'd been asked a few times if I would go and trial for the Great Britain team. And do you know what? I look back now and I was a bit like, yeah, maybe. I don't really have time because netball was my passion. I was like, I can't really commit because I'm already playing this much netball. And then I just thought, do you know what? Why not? I'll go and give it a go. And in 2018, I made it into the Great Britain Women's Seniors team. And it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. It was 2018, I was a surveyor, and then I was a tag rugby player. And we were going to the World Cup in November. And it was really tricky, but yet such a great environment because they would take on a wider squad and they'd just make cuts because it's of injury and also how much you can grow as a player in that year. And so I was just thinking, I'll never make the team. And it meant so much to me when I did. And then we were sponsored to go to Australia to play in the World Cup. So yeah, we were well looked after, and we just had an entire year of, I was living and breathing my sport. And we would do everything from, fitness and camps away for the weekend. We had, time in the classroom where we talk about strategy, and then there would be a nutrition thing that we had to kind of take on board. And then there was sports psychology on top of the fitness training, the skills training, the balls training, all that kind of stuff. So it was amazing. So I've played since 2018. We came back with a bronze medal, which was amazing.
And have you taken those learnings from the rugby pitch into the boardroom from a real estate perspective?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest learnings for me was how well that team worked together. Now we've got, we're talking a big group of sort of very strong-minded, passionate women, all with the same goal to get to Australia, and you're having cuts at the same time. So you could say that could be a disaster where, you're feeling vulnerable, and it could be a terrible team or a terrible environment in the team. But I would say it's probably one of the strongest teams, and I actually went back this year. So I played mixed for 2019 through to last year for GB, and then this year went back to the women's because we had something to prove. We didn't want the bronze medal. We wanted to come back with something better. But it was the same basis of the team, and obviously a few people had changed over the years. But the way we were brought together as a team by the leadership team, by the management, by the managers, by the coaches, was something I'd never really experienced before. And we did personality tests. And I think one thing that changed for us is we did this personality test, and it was probably one of the more simple ones. It was just like, what kind of communicator are you? There were just 4 categories. And in that session, for me, you learn about different personality types, how they want to be spoken to, and how they're likely to speak to you. And then you gave the same back and said, I'm this kind of personality. I want to hear it this way. Yeah. And I think that slightly bonded us. But I also think the coaches were very clear on, you need to turn up with this attitude and nothing else will be tolerated. It was very, very kind, but very firm.
So you knew your boundaries.
Absolutely. And anyone sort of breaking those boundaries, pulled aside, not publicly or anything, but they were pulled aside and just say, look, I need you to turn up with this attitude. I need you to do this. That person hasn't learned that skill yet. So you can either support them like this or whatever it was. And so the boundaries were very, very clear. And to have a team of 20 women that well drilled and looked after and looking after each other was, for me, probably one of the best teams I've been a part of. And it was an absolute privilege to go back and play with them this year. Because we were building on that, and it's been like a 5-year campaign to go back to the World Cup this year. And I would say the positivity and the support and the kind of competition. We had this kind of catchphrase, if you like, which was started off with like, get on the bus, get your attitude on the bus. We're all going for World Cup gold. We want to win that gold. We need to therefore have accountability. We need to support the team. It's not always going to be you on the pitch. How are you going to be okay with that and support the team? And it was all about the team, and that's probably one of the best teams that I've ever been a part of.
And you didn't go one further, you went 2 further, right?
Yeah, we were the first team in the Northern Hemisphere to win a gold medal.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I just got back in August, and it's still kind of need to pinch myself to be like, yeah, we actually did what we set out to do. And to be part of a team that's playing sort of that level, and that to get that much enjoyment out of something that's so serious but also so good, it was just incredible.
How did you manage training and preparation and running a team and visiting your tenants and doing your rent reviews and re-gears and setting your strategy? How did you juggle that?
I didn't sleep. I don't know. I mean, I think it's an amateur sport, and it's a fairly new sport as well. So, we're building up, we're making it, every year it gets more serious, and it gets taken up by another team, another country around the world. I think for me, it was like, I've always had a kind of work hard, play hard attitude. Well, since my year 10 experience at McDonald's, I was like, right, work hard, play hard. And I do commit in work, and I'm when I'm there, and I want to get the job done as best I can. And then when I'm out, you're there in the next moment. You're living as a sort of, right now, the job to be done is this. And so another one of our phrases in Tag Rugby was like, next job. Right, you've done that, move on. Don't, you've scored a try, let's go again. Next job, every time, next job. So I think that probably has been a part of the balance, right? Not thinking about rugby now, I'm thinking about whatever it is in work.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to enter the real estate industry or is kind of stuck in their career right now? However many years post-qualified, what advice would you say to someone?
Okay, so if you want to get into the industry, I would say probably the best thing I did was get work experience. Not the easiest thing to get anymore, but I would say be proactive. I've just been contacted on LinkedIn, this is the first time I've ever had it, by someone who is a sixth form student, just wants to understand more about the real estate market and what a career would look like. And I'm like, absolutely, I will, of course I'll help you. So I'll set up a call with that person and just give them an insight and give them an idea. You've got to be proactive because it's a competitive market and you need to be better than your peers if you want to succeed. And so being proactive, get yourself some work experience, see if you actually like it, and keep talking to people because there's so many different roles in surveying. And depending on your skill set, you will find something that fits quite well for you. And then the second part of your question, if you're stuck, I guess it depends kind of where you are. I would do the research. I would look up, I would consider a careers coach. I would also consider talking to mentors, to friends, to your bosses. Like, where do I go next? What do I want to do? How can I expand this? But don't go with questions. Go with answers. I would like to expand my role. This is how I see it working. How do you think that's going to go? And then you've done the hard work for someone else. And if there's any issues you can see of that not being able to work, let's say you're going to take on more role, how are you going to manage that? Well, actually, this element of my job is on the down now, so I'm not going to be taking up so much work, so much time on that piece of work. And therefore, I think I've got the capacity for this. So go with answers, go with solutions, and then you'll find somebody's more engaging and will probably help you through.
Amazing. Well, look, as we draw to a close, a question that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast is, if I gave you £500 million worth of capital, who are the people, what property, and which place would you look to deploy it?
So I think I'm sure it's tricky at any point in time, but I think right now the market hasn't really bottomed out. It still has this sense of it might have to correct a little bit further. So I'm not sure I would say to you a particular sector. I can tell you the sectors I wouldn't go to, but I wouldn't say industrial sounds great, we'll go in there. I think there's still a correction to be done. And I think we've also got a tricky time with tenants as they navigate the additional costs that they're going through. And I think, I'm seeing more of my tenants getting struggling. And once that happens, you then start losing the rents as well as the yield shift. So you're then double whammy. So I'm not sure I would be looking at a particular sector. I think the smartest thing to do would be to actually go back to where I started, which would be the longer term secure income, and just see where there are people that need to sell, closed-end funds, anyone distressed, things like that, and just start targeting something that with, let's say, government income of 10 years. It might take 2 years for the market to correct. Who knows? We're not going back to the days of 0.5 interest, but the market will correct and stabilise. And at that point, you've then probably done quite well.
So core money, core return
at the moment,
targeting distressed capital structures across the sectors. And in terms of the locations, the place and the people you get on the journey to do it. So
location, I have a sort of bias for Southeast, London and Southeast. And the reason for that is my experience of sort of further afield, in what I'm just described there, is that the Southeast bounces back much quicker. London bounces back even quicker. Now, there are, there's always exceptions to the rules, but I think my bias right now would be that location, just because you want to be able to buy something and see that come back quicker. And then the people, do you mean who would I work with?
Yeah, and
well,
your
my
network?
Own company.
Well, you can have your own company, but is there anyone externally?
Okay, fine. Look, for me, as sort of the asset management side of this, you need particular agents, and I won't name them, but I would definitely have my mind's eye on particular agents, because they're the ones that are all over the market. They know exactly what's going on in their own market. They can respond and give me all parts of information that just help me build up a clear picture of what's going on there.
I won't push you any further.
Thank you.
Well, look, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
You're welcome.
I've absolutely loved finding out a little bit about your background, your experience, your views, the stuff you do outside of work. I have no idea how you fit it all in and manage to play at the highest level, both on the pitch and off the pitch and in the boardroom. So thank you, and excited to see what you and the team go on to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the People Property Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating, like, or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests that we should have on the show or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People Property Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit leadership and future leadership hires for real estate owners, funds, investors, and developers. So if you're looking to hire top talent for your business, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you'll be able to find a wealth of information, or feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.